APEC discusses economic, financial and social inclusion. 2,000 business conditions considered to be chopped. Hello, you're tuning into BizLine, our weekly economic journal on VTV International. I'm Hoàng Hằng and we will now begin with some economic highlights over the past week. Following the third APEC senior official meeting and other related conferences, an APEC event took place in Ho Chi Minh City on August the 28th, called the Symposium on Promoting Economic, Financial and Social Inclusion. This is one of the prioritized concerns for APEC this year and an innovative event from Vietnam as this year's APEC host. According to participants at the symposium, economic inclusion means involving all sectors of the economy with special attention to small and medium-sized enterprises, whereas financial inclusion in APEC can be seen in the 120 financial support projects worth $2.6 billion in the bloc, according to statistics from the Asian Development Bank. Total registered foreign direct investment or FDI capital in the first 8 months of this year reached over $23 billion, a year-on-year increase of over 45%. This is according to the Foreign Investment Agency. In addition, FDI projects have disbursed $10.3 billion, up 5.1% over the same period last year. The manufacturing and processing sector attracted the most attention from foreign investors, accounting for more than half of the total registered FDI. Japan and South Korea are the two biggest investors among the 98 countries and territories investing in the country. The Ministry of Finance is planning to cut import taxes on auto parts of cars with 9 seats or fewer and trucks with a capacity of 5 tons and below. This is in line with Vietnam's commitments to WTO to maintain a tax level on imported auto components between 0% and 30%. In a draft document, the ministry presents 2 methods. In the first method, the import tariffs on 163 auto parts will be down to 0%. In the second method, the ministry wants to decrease import tariffs on 19 parts from 3 to 50%, currently to 0%. According to the Finance Ministry, both methods encourage businesses to manufacture and assemble auto parts locally. Officials say this would increase competitiveness with imported cars, support the local industry, increase domestic consumption, and promote exports. Vietnam's shrimp exports reached nearly $2 billion in the first 7 months of 2017, an increase of 15% over the same period last year. To this end, the Vietnam Fisheries Association and the Directorate of Fisheries organized a workshop in Bạc Liêu province on August the 28th to assess challenges and discuss solutions to promote the sustainable development of the sector. At the workshop, 600 participants discussed clean stream farming models and new production processes in order to reduce costs, increase productivity, and promote environmentally friendly products. Such measures are put forward amid challenges for the sector, such as stricter export criteria into demanding markets, unfavorable weather conditions, environmental pollution, and the overuse of antibiotics. Furthermore, diversification of products in terms of process stream is also of special interest to enterprises. According to Vietnam's rice market development strategy from 2017 to 2020, Vietnam will reform rice production to gain sustainable development in the production and export of rice. To implement this strategy, the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development will review and identify rice growing areas with an advantage to adjust production plans and convert areas with inefficient rice production to other purposes. It will plan a schedule on adjusting production scale and output to meet domestic and international demand and the competitive ability of Vietnamese rice. The move aims to reduce the rice export volume but increase the value of exported rice. Vietnam and Australia have reached an agreement in which Vietnamese firms can export dragon fruits to the land down under. This will be the third Vietnamese fruit to enter the Australian market after lychees and mangoes. With the decision, Vietnam currently remains the first and only country to be given the permit to import fresh dragon fruit into Australia. This will be carried out with strict requirements in place. Like all Vietnamese exporting enterprises must have a permit from the Australian Ministry of Agriculture and Water Resources. Additionally, all goods imported into Australia must also have pest control certification from the Vietnam Plant Protection Department. Those are some highlights in the economic scene. Up next, we will talk about the Ministry of Planning and Investment recent proposal to remove 2,000 business conditions in our crosstalk. On August 22nd, at the Cabinet meeting on building the legal system, the Ministry of Planning and Investment proposed the abolition of around 2,000 unnecessary business conditions. This proposal was part of the government's policies of improving the business environment, reducing production costs, attracting investment, and enhancing productivity and competitiveness of the economy. The Ministry of Planning and Investment also recommended the government apply the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD's principles on regulatory quality. So how can those proposals be effectively implemented in order to achieve planned targets? Before we find out more about this issue, let's take a look at the following clip.
Following the Prime Minister's guidance on assessing the regulatory system on business conditions, the Ministry of Planning and Investment's proposal aims for partial or complete elimination of 302 financial conditions, 1,336 productivity conditions, 127 conditions on business methods, 85 on location, and 80 urban planning requirements. In total, there are more than 2,000 business conditions taken into consideration, and this may not be the final figure.
Các loại điều kiện mà nó có nguy cơ gây ra 5 cái loại tác động bất lợi đến sự phát triển của doanh nghiệp, tác động đến cạnh tranh, gia nhập thị trường, tạo ra rủi ro vân vân, và tác động bất lợi đến doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ thì chúng tôi phân loại nó ra.
Quy trình cắt giảm hiện tại là mỗi bộ ngành tự đề xuất và tự đánh giá cái việc cần thiết hay không đi giấy phép kinh doanh. Tất nhiên thì mỗi bộ ngành thì vốn cơ quan đang thực hiện cấp phép mà cơ quan lại đánh giá cái tính cần thiết của việc cấp phép đấy thì thường là họ tự nguyện cắt bỏ là rất là ít.
And joining our BizLine program this week is Mr. Ray Mallon, Senior Advisor for Australia's Supported Economic Reform Program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
What do you think about the proposals to abolish 2,000 conditions for doing business?
Vietnam's made some remarkable progress over the last decades in attracting increased investment, both from foreign investors and domestic private sector starting to emerge. But there are signs that the rate of growth is slowing down. Many businesses complain about the problems of setting up and having new businesses enter. Making it easier for businesses to enter is very important in terms of stimulating creativity, innovation, and getting a more dynamic Vietnamese economy. So I think it's an important step forward.
What are your assessment of Vietnam's effort in eliminating unreasonable business conditions and sub-licenses in recent years?
Vietnam makes some very important steps forward with some of the changes under the amendments to the enterprise law and the investment law, and you see an acceleration in the number of new business registration. But at the same time, you hear businesses complain that, you know, for every regulation that is removed, sometimes new regulations, new administrative procedures are put in place that make it difficult for them to start up, to create new businesses, to invest in new ideas. So progress is being made, but it's been very, very difficult. It is a very difficult thing to achieve, not just in Vietnam. Most countries that go through this process find it very, very difficult to implement. You've just got to look at the level of new business registrations. You know, the whole just say in the area of starting up businesses, there's been substantial simplification. Just getting rid of the process of requiring stamps, the process of certification, all that has been simplified, and the cost of setting up a new business has been substantially reduced, the time it takes to set up a new business. But there's still problems, and it depends a little bit by sector.
The government and business effort to reduce the number of business conditions has attracted considerable attention in recent weeks. Why is it such an important issue?
The last 5 years globally, there's been a slowdown in productivity growth. There's signs of increasing protectionism, and there's been a slowdown in the Vietnamese economy. So I think it's very important at this stage to be doing something to take action to removing the remaining impediments to businesses. I think it's just been the government has been giving an increasing focus over the last couple of years because of the need to stimulate growth. The fact that the government is, it's been part of the government agenda at the last few weeks, and it's been discussed at a cabinet meeting, does mean it's being discussed and probably taken more seriously.
Since 2014, the number of business conditions has only gone down from 7,000 to 5,719, and they lead to various sub-licenses for enterprises. Despite meeting the food safety requirements of the Ministry of Health, this imported milk product still has to pass animal quarantine by the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development and food safety test by the Ministry of Industry and Trade before getting clearance.
Mất rất nhiều là mẫu, cho nên nó cũng liên quan đến chi phí đầu vào của doanh nghiệp. Bởi vì mỗi ví dụ như là chẳng hạn là mình nhập 100 thùng chẳng hạn, thì nếu mẫu các thứ đã mất khoảng gần 1 thùng, nếu vậy tương đương với khoảng 1%, cho nên nó cũng chi phí nó cũng tương đối là lớn, chưa kể còn mất tiền chi phí kiểm nghiệm nữa.
For food manufacturers using imported materials and ingredients, food safety certification procedures are even more complicated. A cake made of 10 ingredients needs at least 11 licenses, 10 for the ingredients and 1 for the cake itself.
Những cái sản phẩm đó chúng tôi nhập khẩu chẳng hạn thì chúng tôi phải tiến hành xin giấy phép nhập khẩu, công bố cái sản phẩm nguyên liệu đầu vào, bao gói, phụ gia đó. Rồi sau khi chúng tôi sản xuất ra một cái thành phẩm nào đó thì chúng tôi lại phải đi đăng ký công bố lưu hành cái sản phẩm đó, cũng là một lần công bố nữa. Như vậy thì nó công bố, nó chồng công bố.
Sản phẩm đã được chế biến sâu, ví dụ như là sữa, đồ hộp thì vừa phải thực hiện kiểm tra an toàn thực phẩm, vừa phải thực hiện kiểm dịch. Và cái việc kiểm tra an toàn thực phẩm thậm chí lại còn liên quan đến rất nhiều các bộ ngành khác nhau, và chúng tôi kiến nghị các bộ ngành có thể xem xét để giảm cái tỷ lệ kiểm tra đối với những cái mặt hàng đấy xuống, để sẽ góp phần giảm thời gian thông quan cho doanh nghiệp.
Despite not being transport service providers, enterprises which want to use trucks to carry their goods still have to include transportation in their business registration. This procedure takes 2 months and involves the Ministry of Planning and Investment and the Ministry of Transport. Enterprises are even required to present their business plans related to using trucks, which are approved by state agencies.
Không thu tiền từ người ngoài mà chỉ phục vụ cho chính doanh nghiệp mình thôi, thì cũng không, khi mà đã phục vụ cho chính doanh nghiệp mình thì cũng không thể lên một bài toán cụ thể là cái lợi ích từ cái kinh doanh vận tải nó cụ thể là bao nhiêu giống như người ta kinh doanh vận tải, nên là cũng rất là bất cập.
Thì cơ quan nhà nước làm sao mà xác nhận được điều kiện kinh doanh nó phù hợp hay không phù hợp, và liệu doanh nghiệp có khai thật những cái kế hoạch kinh doanh của mình cho cơ quan nhà nước hay không? Có rất nhiều những dẫn chứng là hiện tại cái điều kiện kinh doanh đang can thiệp vào quyền tự chủ kinh doanh của doanh nghiệp.
According to a survey by Vietnam Private Sector Forum 2017, 44% of enterprises said they had missed business chances due to legal hindrances and limited access to market. The figures are 47% and 46% in the technology and agriculture sectors, respectively.
What are the impacts of unnecessary business conditions and sub-licenses?
You hear a lot of stories. You talk to people who are trying to innovate, trying to set up a business in a new area. Might be doing something which ends up being a company that emerges as a major player regionally or internationally, but continually get frustrated in trying to establish that business because of those conditions. So I think that's the cost to Vietnam of the current arrangements, is you're stopping some potentially, regional players or very important entrepreneurs from emerging. And also, you're particularly stopping those that are less connected to political power structures. If you're well connected, quite often the business conditions are less of a problem because you know who to contact, who to talk to, and the problem can be resolved. But for people in rural areas, people who are less connected to power, maybe more women, they will face more problems.
It is said that many of the recently issued business conditions are no different than those that issued many years ago. What are your comments on this?
I'm not sure that they're exactly the same. I would say that as capacity builds up, the quality or the sophistication of many of the regulations has improving, and that's part of the problem. It makes it harder to get around those laws because they are quite complicated. They're probably less and less following the OECD principles of good regulation, which has a lot of a lot of the criteria they're looking for is simplicity, transparency, and also assessing, making sure that all the regulators look out and assess the alternative options.
In your opinion, how many business conditions and sub-licenses can Vietnam eliminate under the current regulatory system?
I couldn't give an exact number, but probably quite a lot. I mean, increasingly, the idea of having business conditions or business licensing is seen as a very inefficient way of achieving policy objectives. For instance, there's a lot of regulations about requiring a license about where you put a factory. That's not the place to regulate. Okay, if you're in a city area, you may not want fertilizer factories or polluting factories to be established in that urban area, but it's not efficient to achieve that objective by using business conditions. Much better to have a very good urban zoning, urban land management system, and that's the best practice would be to go to that way, not regulating each individual industry about where it sets up. That should be a business decision.
Considering the current situation, what are the consequences if Vietnam cannot eliminate unnecessary business conditions and sub-licenses?
Well, the business sector won't grow as fast, it won't be as dynamic, it won't, and you won't get the level of growth in incomes and that you would otherwise achieve.
Không thể chờ tuần tự từng cái này, từng cái điều kiện một, chờ tuần tự từng bộ, từng ngành một. Thì đến bao giờ 2.000 cái đến bao giờ sao? Chính các cái đối tượng doanh nghiệp mà phải tuân thủ các cái quy định họ đặt ra, họ đề xuất ngược trở lại. Nếu các bộ ngành chủ động là tiếp thu cái đấy trước để đưa ra cái đề xuất với chính phủ trước khi thẩm định thì đấy là tốt nhất. Còn nếu không thì cơ quan thẩm định phải xem xét cả hai ý kiến hai bên.
Không chỉ là rà soát cắt giảm những giấy phép kinh doanh hiện có mà phải xây dựng một quy trình để kiểm soát cái việc đặt ra các điều kiện kinh doanh, việc ban hành mới các điều kiện kinh doanh cũng là một yêu cầu rất là quan trọng.
Chúng ta không chỉ chú trọng vào những cái hồ sơ giấy tờ mà chúng ta phải chú trọng vào những cái việc thực hiện của các doanh nghiệp, nó giảm bớt những cái chi phí không cần thiết kể cả đối với cơ quan nhà nước khi mà thực hiện những cái công tác hậu kiểm này.
Currently, what are the challenges for the Ministry of Planning and Investment to abolish these 2,000 conditions for doing business?
There are vested interests that will resist, and so the government needs to recognise that that's a reality. We have the same problem in Australia, of course, too. There are areas where you need good regulation. It's not simply a matter of abolishing it. And that will also be another reason why some officials are going to be very nervous to get rid of the conditions. They're going to be worried that if they get rid of that regulation, there is a problem in that sector. They will be seen to have not done their job right. So there are areas where, in a market economy, where you need very good regulation. So the challenge is making sure that there are other policy measures in place that achieve the regulatory objectives that are very, very important.
What do you think are the solutions to accelerate the abolition of 2,000 unnecessary business conditions and sub-licenses in Vietnam?
I think there's need for sustained high-level commitment by the national leaders, from the government, National Assembly, make sure that the ministries and the general population are aware that the government sees it as very, very important. So I think having that top-level pressure for change, very important. And then at the same time having sort of bottom-up level pressure. And I think in terms of the bottom-up level pressure, it's very important that there be a better understanding of the real costs of the bad regulations, how much it's costing the economy in terms of growth, how much it's costing individual people in terms of improved incomes and living standards. Getting that information out is very important, and so I think it's important that institutes like CIM and IPSA that we're working with have better evidence base of the cost of these regulations, and then engage with the media, with key interest groups such as business associations, consumer associations, etc., to make sure that there is a better understanding of what these current business conditions are costing Vietnam.
Along with the proposal to remove 2,000 business conditions, the Ministry of Planning and Investment also recommended the government apply the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD's principles regulatory equality. This recommendation includes 3 tasks. First, replacing business conditions with standards on safety and issuing detailed instructions on how to meet those standards. Second, the state allows enterprises to check their own products and announce their qualifications and carry out random checks on those products and services. Third, strictly implementing risk management methods in order to enhance regulatory equality and reduce costs.
The Ministry of Planning and Investment also petitioned the government to adopt management practices and standards of the OECD. So can you give some information of its principles that Vietnam can apply?
There's a broad range of principles that the OECD pushes that could improve regulatory quality here. I mean, it ranges from their principles on competition policy, on regulatory standards, on regulatory oversight, etc. In terms of regulatory governance, so they have some good principles in terms of regulatory oversight and the governance of regulatory institutions. Increasingly in OECD countries is a move to make sure that key regulators are separate from ministries that may have commercial interests in business activity.
And what sector in the Vietnam's economy do you imagine would directly benefit from such principles that we can apply immediately?
Given the number of people affected, the agricultural sector is very important. The level of regulation has diminished over time, but there are still barriers. There's issues related to logistics, whether it be transport services, etc. There's restrictions still on the capacity that a transport company must have. It must be a certain size before it's allowed to get a business license to operate. It may also only be licensed to operate on certain routes. This is not efficient, and it doesn't get competition, doesn't get creative solutions to reduce the cost of shipping goods. There's also issues where there's very important need for regulation, but there's still enormous overlap between ministries. And if you look, for instance, health, food safety, some of those regulations are issued by the Ministry of Agriculture, some from health, some from environment. You need a more coordinated approach to make sure that the simplified regulations, and if they're simpler, they're more likely to be enforceable. If you tend to follow the OECD principles, minimise the overlap between different agencies.
Can you give some example of successful implementation of OECD's principles?
It's a good start, what the government has done with the law on the issue of normative documents. The challenge is enforcing that. And again, as I say, that's not unique to Vietnam. We have a requirement in Australia for regulatory impact statements on all of our new regulations. And the government is often criticising the quality of those regulatory impact statements. It's difficult, it's not easy. Regarding competition policy, I think that's critically important. If with the new law they accept the OECD principles of having the regulatory agency, the enforcement agency, somehow, not totally independent, but at least independent of other agencies that are owning commercial entities. In Australia, we also have a productivity commission, which is sort of like the oversight agency that tries to assess regulatory quality. I think probably Vietnam could think about looking, where in areas where there's particular delays in getting implementation and particular problems faced by businesses is have a substantive regulatory review of that particular sector.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk about this issue.
The Ministry of Planning and Investment's proposal to remove 2,000 business conditions were presented to the government. Opinions from firms and investors are being collected in order to finalize the list of removable business conditions and sub-licenses. Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc said he hopes to see tangible results in the fourth quarter of 2017, so positive changes in administrative reforms are expected from now until the end of the year. That has also wrapped up this edition of BizLine. If you would like to watch more of our programs and updates, do log on to vtv4.vn or our YouTube channel at VTV4Go. Goodbye for now and thanks for